Real Estate Rewired.
Welcome to Real Estate Rewired, AI with a Heart with Gus Waite. And today, this is a space where I'm interviewing 100 people in the real estate space, including AI vendors, people who are building cool shit to figure out what's going on in this space. And James, I'm so grateful to have you on today. James is a CEO and founder of Keyflow.ai. And what I want to start with is the pain that you experienced, because the pain is the great teacher. So give me that story, James, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Looking forward to sharing with you today. As you mentioned, my name is James Smith. I'm co-founder of Keyflow.ai. My partner, Cole Wrightson, and I started or founded this company 6 months ago. It really came from a pain that I was experiencing in the real estate market very acutely. What I had learned in the over 6 years of being an agent and really 10 years of being in the real estate industry itself was that it didn't matter how good of a job I did on one closing process from contract to closing. There was a lot of drift from my quality and from my process from one closing to the next. And I always felt like a newbie. I think one thing I got better at over the years was just being confident and okay with being in a position to where I could admit that I made a mistake, or that I wasn't upset with the title company because they made a mistake, or anyone else during that contract closing process, because there's so many moving parts and there's so many people that are involved in that process. There's so many documents that have to be turned in. And then, that's not even considering the changes that happen. And in those workflow changes, for example, an addendum, for every addendum, that's going to change the workflow a little bit. And just keeping up with that gets pretty complicated. The other piece of that too is, the more deals you do, the more you start to realize, like, man, this isn't even the fun part. I don't actually even enjoy the contract to closing piece. There's just so much paperwork, there's so much to keep up with, and I don't enjoy it. And what it keeps me away from doing is actually doing the stuff that I do enjoy, that I, get paid money to do, which is, find clients to serve, and get their property under contract. And so by, you know, I guess by fire, I over those
Well,
10 years.
tell him about the $15,000. That's the one I want to hear about.
Yeah, yeah, 15 grand, man. And that's the piece. At the very end of the day, there are mistakes that do happen. And if that mistake costs your client money, you have to make a decision. You're either going to have that conversation with your client and say, hey, listen, I made a mistake. It's going to cost you $15,000. Or you're going to be in a position to where you made a mistake and you go to your client and you say, hey, listen, that was my bad. I'm not going to let that affect you. I got you covered. Right. And for me, that was a checkbox that on a contract, on a purchase agreement, that said that the buyer paid for my commission as a real estate agent instead of the seller. Okay. And that happened. It was a silly mistake by me because I had used a template of a contract for a previous deal, right? To where I just didn't switch that checkbox, because I never changed that checkbox. I just changed it that one time for that one deal. And nobody caught that error. I didn't catch that error. I showed up at closing. I had no idea, right? Had that conversation with the title company. And then I thought, oh man, let me look at that. And sure enough, a mistake happens. And, hundreds of mistakes happen. The thing about real estate is you make a lot of money in real estate. You lose a lot of money in real estate really quickly, sometimes on the same transaction. And at the end of the day, you just got to roll with it, because it takes money to make money in this business. And
So let me
one of the
stop you.
big things before you pop in here, one of the big things for me is that there's a gap between what an agent does and what an agent hires a transaction coordinator for. And that gap is what I created Keyflow to serve.
Got it. So James, let's back it up even further here, and don't steal this one from me, because it took me a year to kind of really narrow this down. The only purpose of AI is to allow anybody to do more of what they love and less of what they don't.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. At the end of the day, if you're not utilizing AI to take repetition, to take administration off of your plate so that you can focus on higher value work, then you're not using AI right. And I think some people are still in the mindset that AI is their competition. And I think that they haven't really considered they haven't really considered how AI can actually empower them to do things and to do more of things that as a human we can do incredibly well, but a computer just isn't very good at.
So let's back it up even further. I always usually start with this question, James. Most 8-year-old kids don't go, oh man, I want to be a real estate agent when I grow up. So what was your journey? How did you get into this space? You know what I mean? Like, how did you end up where you are right now?
Yeah, by the grace of God, quite frankly. I grew up in a real small town, Cheyenne, Oklahoma. I graduated with 16 people. In fact, the county in Oklahoma that I grew up in, still to this day, is the only county in Oklahoma that doesn't have a stoplight. Yeah. So my dad was a truck driver. My mom was a teacher. I grew up playing chess after school, right? I grew up in the school system. My mom started a chess team. We played a lot of chess, man. In fact, I was state champion chess player when I was 11 in Oklahoma. And, I didn't go to college thinking, man, I'm going to get into real estate. I didn't have anything. I didn't know anything about real estate. My house burned down. Our house burned down when I was in fourth grade, and we moved into another house, and then we moved into another house after that. And that was what I understood from the perspective of real estate. I didn't have a good understanding of what it was. I went to college for professional selling and marketing. I learned more about sales. I spent the entire my entire high school and college time frame working in sales jobs, but always wanting to not be in sales anymore. And I caught myself later on in college thinking, man, I've just spent all this time in sales and I just don't have a trade. I don't know anything about anything specifically. And every time I start working for another company, I have to learn a new product. Right. And that's why I say by the grace of God, because that journey continued. I graduated. I started working for a company called Automatic Data Processing, where I sold human resources software in Dallas and Oklahoma City to small and major accounts. I sold for a company called Waste Management for several years, where I sold trash services and I learned about contracts. Okay.
By
This
the
is
way,
still
we're from Jersey, so easy with the trash stuff. Oh, take it
Yeah.
easy.
Hey, listen, I talk trash. I talk trash every single day professionally for over 4
There you
years, and
go.
and I was one of the best at it, okay? I was a trash talking. I loved my trashy clients, all right? And I told them too. I was very upfront with my clients, especially the trashiest of my clients. I would let them know,
Uh-huh.
"Listen, you are the trashiest client that I have, right? And I would like for you to stay that way." You know?
I love
But I learned about contracts. I learned about contracts and I learned about real estate when I was working for Waste Management. Okay. I had to go to these job sites and I would learn, I learned how to identify early developments. I learned to spot places that construction was about to start. Okay. I learned how to read a contract. I learned how to I learned how to enforce a contract. People talk about, when I talk to people about waste management, we started talking about trash, but I let them know very quickly. Listen, they're not in the trash. I mean, yeah, they're in the trash service business, but they're in the legal contract business. That's the business that they're in. And in order to be able to sell a client, it's one of the toughest sales cycles that you can do, because not only are you trying to sell the client, but also you're trying to sell internally the company to take on that client. And then you're trying to sell the competitor whose container is on that job site to remove their container. Those three things, they don't happen all at once. And that's the toughest part about that business. But I learned about contracts and I learned about real estate. And I went to an event late at night, Cam Dunlap. I think he's from New York. Short little guy, man, flies around the country on a jet that he owns. And he was selling a product called the Vacant House Data Feed, the Vacant House Database. Okay, I went to this evening real estate event. It's from like, one of them 7 to 9 o'clock p.m. events. And he was there and he invited us out on Saturday to hear his full spiel. And he was old school sales, right? Totally like, I've got 3 of these I'm going to sell. And if you're the 4th person, it's tough. You're not getting it. All right.
Mm-hmm.
But what I saw there was I saw a system. I saw a system that I'd spent my entire life thinking, damn, I've been doing sales so long and I don't have a trade. Right. And he started going through this system to where it was like leads, right?
Mm-hmm.
Phone numbers, names, comparables. Okay. And then I started thinking, I was like, man, because I've been using Salesforce for at this point 6 or 7 years, and I saw this and I thought, I can do that. I don't know anything about any of this stuff, right? But I already do that. And I don't know about the stuff that I'm selling. ADP, I spent most of my career at ADP not knowing what I was selling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very complicated software process. Okay. Waste management. I spent the first year not knowing what I was selling, right? But what I knew was that's mine. Nobody's paying me an annual salary to do this. But when I do it, that money is mine, right? I'm not getting windfalled by a company that told me that I was uncapped commission, right? And so I saw that and I said, you know what? I'll do it. And so it didn't take him, 30 seconds after he finished and told the people who wanted it to go to the back, because I was sitting on the front row and I was like, man, I should have sat on the back row so I could just stand up and go to the back table. But I just stood up and I walked to the back and I was ready. Right. And so I did. I went back there. I think it was $3,000 I paid, for this system to get set up. And it included a trip to Arizona. I'm like 3 months later, not plane tickets or anything, but it included that event to go in and get one-on-one help. And so that's what I did. I started working in real estate. I started learning. I started watching YouTube videos. I just dominated YouTube videos.
Mm-hmm.
He taught this system I would later learn was called wholesaling. Okay. And it is essentially to where you go and you find property owners who want to sell their property and you making them offer. They either accept or decline, but if they accept the offer, then now you have a contract. And that starts the second phase of the pipeline, which is, okay, now I have to find somebody who wants this deal for more than what I'm offering. Okay. And, ultimately, I did that for 4 years or so. I wholesaled probably 120, 140 houses, not just houses, but land as well in that 2 or 3 year period. And that's where I really started to understand the closing process. And it felt foreign when I was walking into those title companies because they're real fancy and I was okay with most of that because I was in business to business sales for so long. But what I wasn't okay with yet was, man, I made that mistake. It should have been this way instead of that. Right? Oh, I forgot about this. I didn't include this piece. Right? And the last minute scrambles that the title companies are having to do to make sure that the closing statements are correct. Okay, I wasn't used to that. I didn't
Well,
know any better, you know?
yeah, no, and it's interesting because my family had restaurants when I was a kid, so I often have these restaurant analogies. But most people get into real estate. They like people. People say they want to be their own business. They don't want to be a salaried employee, right? And they're good with people. They like running around, showing property. But if most agents were honest, the first time you're sitting at that closing table and you don't really understand who the hell is doing what and what they're saying, and this attorney's saying this, and papers are being passed back and forth, and checks are being cut, and it can feel very intimidating to be in that situation as a new agent and not really understand it. And what I hear you saying, James, is because you were doing so many of those wholesaling, you started to really understand because basically you were just selling the gap. You bought it for 120, you're selling it for 130 or whatever the numbers are. Like you had to understand because if mistakes were made in there, all of a sudden there was a, $7,000 charge at the last second because this thing or that thing, and you didn't understand that process, you'd end up making no money. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. Or worse, I'd end up with a contract that I made with another human being who a lot of times was in a position to where they really did need to sell the property. And they were giving me what they thought was a good deal and what I thought was a good deal, right? In order to make it happen quickly. And so the weight of that situation, it wasn't beyond me. And in fact, that's also what led to me as I had a friend who was in commercial real estate and he said, "Man, you're doing that with wholesaling. Why don't you come do that with me?" And so I did. So I made that transition and really I turned that part of real estate that I'm really grateful for, where I learned the business. It was a place for me as someone who knew nothing about real estate and had a job. It was a place for me to enter the industry and to start to understand the business. And I'll be forever grateful for that. I'll never wholesale from that capacity again, but I'll be forever grateful for the bridge that it allowed, or that it was for me into real estate. And so I started applying what I did as a wholesaler, as an investor in real estate. I started applying that for clients that I was representing in commercial real estate.
Got it. So it just where's the bridge? Just so I understand the gap, James. So you're doing the wholesaling, and then you said you ran into a buddy, and what was he doing in real estate, and what was your next? You know what I mean? Like where did you go from the wholesaling? What was next in real estate for you?
Yeah, he was a commercial real estate broker, and he was looking for agents to be part of his team. Okay. And at that point, I was making more outside of waste management than I was at waste management. And so I decided to leave waste management and do real estate full time. And that's when I decided, if I'm going to do this full time, I need to get a license. I'm doing the investor piece, but I'm missing out on half the revenue over here. And what I knew at that point in sales was that, I wanted, I'd spent the better part of my professional sales career selling lower ticket items. Okay. Items to where, I was a hunter. Okay. And when you're a hunter and you've got to close 100+ deals a year to be able to make a decent living, that puts you in an accelerated situation for completing and tracking paperwork. And so when I saw the opportunity to move into commercial real estate, I thought, the longer sell cycle on these pieces, but they're also bigger pay, bigger commission deals, so that I can really be able to utilize my skills in this business, and unique skills, because I brought a very unique skill set to the industry and to my clients with my background. Not a lot of people come from corporate sales into real estate. And so that was very valuable for me, not just for me, but also for my clients. And so I made that change. I made that move. I was still doing some investing on the side, but that's when it really started clicking to me. The more that I spend physically doing, flips or going and trying to find real estate investment deals, the less time that I'm able to create my pipeline for commercial real estate. And my very first listing for commercial real estate was about a $3 million listing. Okay. And this was the biggest opportunity for a paycheck I'd ever had in my entire life, ever. And I was the third person to get this listing. And within 3 months of having the listing, it was under contract to sell. And that was the moment that really hit me, to where it was like, what am I doing? Why am I spending time over here when I could be over here? It was really that moment of, this is right for me. This was this is where I'm supposed to be. And, you know, and so that's kind of how the transition happened. After that first deal, I just I started cold calling more. I built my entire business, all of my businesses, off of cold calling. I There are a lot of ways that you can do business, and the one that I am most good at is building really good lists, understanding what it takes to build a really good list, and being okay with dialing 50 phone numbers before I talk to one person. So those two things that I really dug into while I was there. But over the course of my commercial real estate career, and I'm still an agent with eXp Commercial. I don't do as many deals because I'm focused on Keyflow. I'm focused on serving this need in the real estate market. But what I realized that, after I helped my clients close a little over 50 transactions in the last 4 years from a commercial real estate standpoint.
Got it. So let me ask quick question for you, James. Are you familiar with the term the Move 37 moment in the documentary AlphaGo when Demis Hassabis and all those guys realized 10 years ago, like, oh my, it's a great, you should see it. It's called AlphaGo. And basically what it was Demis Hassabis and all these guys who had Google DeepMind brought it over to South Korea to play the World Go Championship, which is a game in Asia. Like if you love chess, it's like the chess. There's like a trillion different moves that you can make. And there was this one move that it made where the AI team thought, and the whole world thought, like, oh, okay, this doesn't work. This thing is stupid. Like they're not there yet. But it was only until like 40 moves later that they were able to see that it could see something that nobody else had ever seen. And so it's pattern recognition at that moment. They literally have Demis Hassabis in the back room, in the green room, saying, we can solve protein folding. Like he was able to see it. In my experience, everybody I talk to, there's a moment, and I'm curious for you, James. What was your holy S moment of like with AI where you went, oh man, this thing is like, this is a game changer. Do you remember what that moment was for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was about a year and a half ago because I'm an entrepreneur, and one thing that I know from real estate is that you got to spend money to make money. So though I built my business off of cold calling, things have transitioned. I've always had to invest in other places in order to bring in new leads. One thing that I've had experience was I constantly struggled with finding the right CRM for us to track and to work leads. Because if it did fit for commercial real estate or real estate just in general, there was a lot of workarounds that I had to do, and I was always frustrated by that. So I spent a lot of time and a lot of money trying to develop my own system because I knew the logic was there. I was very logically minded. I've been able to identify, you know, at every place that I've been, like, man, I shouldn't have to do this. Right. This is
Yes.
the part right here that's keeping me from doing this stuff that I'm really good at. And so, but I started paying a lot of money for developers and, experts to come in, and not just from a marketing perspective, but, also from infrastructure perspective as well. And the thing that I realized was that when I brought people in from these other places, I always felt helpless. I was paying them an absolute fortune to do work for me that I needed done. And I had no way to understand whether or not they were even trying to finish. Right. So for me, my aha moment was the very first moment that I was able to take a plan from, that I had built, a diagram that I had built out that was essentially the workflow for my entire business.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to use a combination of Chat GPT and Grok. At that time, I was using a lot of Chat GPT and Grok, and I was able to make it. And I thought, my gosh, this this is this is the difference. I don't know if I read this somewhere or if it was an internal aha moment. Um, but we're living at a time um where the people who can't um the people who can are not the gatekeepers of what the people who know what they need now are living in a time where they can create what they need without being a prisoner of the people who know how to do it.
So here's where I'll go. And by the way, I'm dying to know, which CRM did you end up with?
So no, I mean I have my own internal CRM that I have built,
But
but
I mean,
I
like
love
on a
Trello.
GH, on a, was it?
No, I built it out on my actual on my server, and I just host it out. It was built completely through, Claude and Chat GPT to serve my needs, but it's similar to what a Trello board is. Okay? Similar
Got
to
it.
what Trello is.
The reason that I mention this is, and this is a whole interesting space, right? We had the SaaS apocalypse a couple of months ago where the stock on all these SaaS companies went down, because my experience with all of them, and I mean, Salesforce is a perfect example. In order to justify their pricing, they'd give me 8,000 things I don't need, but it wasn't able to do the one thing I do need,
That is
right?
exactly right. The problem is these tiered services, and I experienced this in real estate, and I'm not gonna mention the name of
Sure.
the company
But
that
and
we
it's
use.
everybody. It's not, we're not picking on any one particular thing. The
Right,
whole
that's right.
business model was subscription. Listen, I'll use QuickBooks as an example. I did QuickBooks for 20 years. It drove me nuts because it had 1,000 things that I don't care about. But the two things I couldn't figure out how to do, I couldn't do it.
That's
And
right,
so it
and in
was
order to do it, you had to pay for the higher subscription, right,
right,
to unlock that part of the platform, and what you run into as a real estate agent is that, like, it's your broker that has to do that, or it's your employer that has to do that. And so now we're having a conversation with the employer trying to make it happen, and they're like, "I'm not
right,
paying that extra just so you can do this
exactly.
one thing."
Well, and here's the magic piece that you talked about, James. And I heard recently, and I love this. Every job description is a series of tasks. Every workflow is made up of a series of tasks. And the way I'm looking at AI right now, there's the black, the white, and the gray. The black is what I think AI could do all day, every day. When I get a text from my doctor a day ahead of time saying you got an appointment tomorrow at 1 o'clock, 100% of the time AI can do that. Because if it screws it up, I call them up and reschedule. When I'm with the doctor, I don't want AI a part of that. I want him having a conversation with me face to face. But in real estate, as in every business, there's all this gray area, which is A, can AI do it? Can it do it better? Should it be doing it? Should it be doing it with a human in the loop today, but 6 months from now we can take the human out of the loop? And I would imagine in your building of Keyflow, there was lots of conversations about what can it do 100%? Where do we need a human in the loop? How do we structure this workflow? And then the question I have for you is, as agentic AI becomes more and more capable, like internally, how do you test now? I mean, you saw when the new Claude model was released a couple of months ago, I had another aha moment where I'm like, okay, wait a minute. This stuff is growing so quick. Like, to even keep up with how to integrate it into my own workflow is a challenge. So I'm curious as to how you deal with that four-parted question.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the most important, aspects of really even implementing AI into your workflow is finding a part of the process that people are spending money on, people are throwing money at. Okay, people's lives are worse because of the workflow that they're currently having to go through. And, a big piece of what I identified from the real estate market is that as agents, as brokers, we are absolutely throwing money at a problem that is very administratively heavy. And it's very time driven, and it has a lot of considerations. Okay. And with those different factors, you also get a lot of drift. You'll hear me anytime somebody talks to me about anything, I think in terms of drift now. I think it's probably one of the most important ideas that
So
people.
say more about that, James. When you say drift, how do you define it?
Yeah. Um, the reason I think it's important is because when we're looking at a transaction process, you may, as a human being, you may have a written down system of exactly what you're going to go through. You may be that person who has a checklist for everything. Okay. But what will end up happening eventually is you will start drifting away from some of the things that you were doing really good. You will also start drifting away from some of the things that you were doing really bad. So there's benefits on both sides. However, when it comes to drift from a human in the process, what we can't do is make small little changes that are going to consistently be a part of that workflow until we change it otherwise. Okay. And so what we end up with is a transaction where we served our client really well because maybe that was the only deal that we had at closing, right? Or maybe we spent too much time on the transaction process and not enough time out building our pipeline. Okay. But the very next deal, maybe you had two or three under contract and you had some leads that came in. Okay. So now all of a sudden you do have a checklist. Okay. But you're not working it as well because you don't have as much time. And that drift impacts the quality of service that you're able to provide to your clients. And so when I talk in terms of drift, I talk in terms of, things that we do in repetition and the order logically that we want to do them in order to have the best outcome. And humans are terrible at this. This is
Mhm.
something that humans are not good at. Computers are insanely good at it. Okay. And when you're talking, from an AI perspective, your zero is there is no, it's all completely black and white, and a 10 is completely creative. Okay. Humans are very creative. Computers are very black and white. Okay. And we're not, we're good at different things. Okay. But we're not good at the same things. We need each other, actually.
So you have this sort of about a year and a half ago, and you hated the CRMs, and then you had this aha moment where you're like, oh my God, all this stuff that people are telling me, I don't know who to believe or what they're charging. It's like you get into ChatGPT, you're like, oh my God, I'm playing around with Grok. And now all of a sudden it's telling me, like, hey, dude, you can build this. Like, you don't need these guys. Or you may need them a little bit, but like the basic architecture of it now, it's like they can bullshit you less because you have more information. So I guess it would be right. Like if I was going to hire an architect and they were going to tell me, man, it's going to cost you 70 grand to build the kitchen. And I put that into GPT and it said, well, yeah, but that's if you use this material for the counter. But if you use that, you could save on this. And you know what I mean? So it's now giving me context from which to have a conversation with the experts. Is that accurate, what I just said?
Absolutely. So here's the big piece about anybody who's trying to create a system or a process for themselves. You may start out thinking that this is what you need. Okay? And the more you build it, the more you realize. Okay? In real estate,
Tell me
these are
about
called
it.
change orders, right?
Right.
And if you have a bunch of change orders, your contractors are going to hate you. And that's just the nature of it. Even though they can charge you for more, it just messes up their system because they're trying to align themselves for jobs beyond your job. And if you start adding change orders, that adds time. Okay? And so now all of a sudden they're 2 weeks, over what they expected, and they've got people upset with them because they're not working on their projects. Okay. So this is a fundamental piece to where, the technology itself kind of unchains the creator. It allows you to go through and really be able to create a plan, start to finish, on what you actually need and to really understand the dependencies on the backside of the environment that make all of that possible. And from an AI standpoint, if you can utilize it from a very high level to create those diagrams, to understand what you're trying to accomplish and how each of those pieces, how each of those nodes, how they affect each other. Now, all of a sudden, you have what you need in order to work with an engineer to develop that project.
Got it. So let me ask you this, James, and I'm just picturing this in my head. So obviously there was the pain of clicking the wrong box and losing the 15 grand. And not only losing the 15 grand, which sucks for you, it's also like you got two bad choices here. Either I go to my client, we had a great experience. Now his last moment with me is this guy's incompetent. He pissed me off. At the last second, he's reaching into my pocket for 15 grand. That doesn't work. Or, oh my God, I just spent 3 months working and I didn't click the box and I lost 15 grand. That's painful, right? Was that the reason? And now you have this aha moment with AI. There's a lot of different businesses you can build. There's a lot of different ways you can go with it, which is one of the challenges. You decide to go with the transaction management piece. Was that like as soon as you got aha, was that the first thing that occurred to you is like, I want to automate this?
No, no, it
Okay,
wasn't.
tell
And
me.
actually, all of that pain point stems from, yes, I cold call a lot, and I had a team of 5 cold callers, and it was a hell of a task to organize and maintain control and quality of all of those dialed numbers and context.
Got
Okay.
it.
But what that opened up for me, what it helped me realize was, oh my God, I can make whatever I want. And just so happens, I was in a stage to where I was like, man, I want to launch software. I have a brother who has launched multiple companies and sold multiple software companies. This has been something that I had seen since I was a little kid. And I wanted that. I wanted that lifestyle. I wanted that for my kids. Okay. I wanted to be able to take that next step. In my career in real estate, I've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars learning from masters in the business who, after they spent enough time learning and understanding the market, created a solution for the market to utilize that was incredibly impactful um, for the people who utilize that. And I wanted to do that, but I didn't know where to start. I created first a company called Nosio, and I was by myself. And what Nosio was it was just natural language. You could text and ask it specific questions or get comps or whatever, and it would take all the publicly available information and it would share it or answer it back to you and give you the information that you needed. Okay. But what I learned with Nosio, which I would go on to create an application for the Y Combinator and turn that in and not get in. What I learned from the process of building Nosio in those 6 months was I got to start with a problem that people are paying money to solve. And that's when I realized, you know what? I just spent all this time and money trying to solve a problem in my own business. Why don't I start taking a look at that? And then as I started going through it, it became very obvious the part of the business that people are throwing money at to try and solve the problem and are continually struggling and continually, especially with the more regulation in the industry itself, because the more regulation, the more administrative tasks that come along with it, the higher the burden, the more money that you spend as an agent to just try and stay away from it, and the lower the bar gets on what the product is you're actually getting. On top of that, anytime that I heard of a great transaction coordinator, I would always say, awesome, can I get their number so I can use them? And then I would find out that transaction coordinator already has their maximum amount of agents. Okay. And so what you find with these TCs is that, and all TCs, not all TCs are the same, but they'll all serve a role. And what you got to find is you got to train them, right? Just like you would any other employee, mostly. But the great TCs, the ones that people are talking about, they have a full book of agents and they can only do so many deals. But what you realize is that even when you hire that TC, you're still having to provide an input to receive their output. And there's always a time barrier in between input and output. And my main issues as an agent was when I provide input, I have everything pulled up on my computer. When I receive output the next day or hours later, I do not have things pulled up on my computer. Changes cannot happen. But if I provide input and I receive output 5-10 minutes later, I still have everything that I need to make quick changes so that now this is checked off my list. It's not another task that's added for rework later on. Okay? And so that's what brought me to the idea of Keyflow was, man, there's this gap. Like, yes, transaction coordinators, they serve a purpose and we're not replacing them. There are parts of what they are doing that we are replacing, but we are not replacing the transaction coordinator themselves. I think that they're valuable for the people who are doing enough transactions to need them. But I think that the gap that we are filling with Keyflow is a gap that should be done with computers. It should be done with AI.
Right. And this is where it gets in, and this is sort of back to my thing, right? If you were to take from the moment where you get a verbal yes, okay, we got a meeting of the minds, nothing's been written up yet, to you're sitting at the closing table and getting your check, okay? I mean, off the top of your head, 300, 400, 500 tasks? If you were to break down, like, literally, okay, we've come to an agreement. Now, the contract's got to be drawn up. You got to put the names in. We've got to put the terms in. Then you start looking at all the different people, the financing and the lawyers and the review and the inspection. How many tasks exist between a meeting of the minds and getting a check?
From a task standpoint, hard to say because there's a lot of untrackable tasks that happen.
Right.
But let's take a task that we can track. Emails. Okay? Now, consider this. Not every agent uses emails or broker uses emails in the same way. But every agent receives documents and submits documents through email. And this is why Keyflow started in your inbox. We will be everywhere. We will be everywhere in the future. But we started in your inbox because this is where your critical data is. And so your average transaction is going to have somewhere between 20 and 30 emails.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your commercial transactions or your more difficult residential transactions are going to have close to 100 or, in some cases, hundreds.
Yes.
Okay? And that is the heart of where all of this is. And the biggest piece to that is, as an agent, we are very rarely sitting at our computer. In fact, a majority of time, we will be driving somewhere, we're walking out of a meeting, we're walking into a meeting, we're about to be on a, whatever, and we'll open our phone and we'll see an email and we'll say, booyah, got the executed document, right? Or, damn, they didn't want it, or whatever. But you see it. And then now all of a sudden you say, okay, I've got the document. As soon as I get back out of this meeting, I need to process it and organize it so that I can be in compliance and so that my broker has me in their system so that my errors and omissions insurance applies in some cases. Okay. And so you make that mental note and then you walk into that meeting. Maybe it was a great meeting. Maybe it went perfectly smooth and you're walking out and you're like, okay, now it's time, but it never fails. If that meeting was smooth, you're walking out, you're getting a phone call, something's on fire. And now your attention, and it may not even be real estate related, you know,
Right.
maybe it's personally, something personal, but you're getting a phone call and your attention is going to be taken away from that mental note of, I just received that fully executed document. I need to make sure that that is uploaded and processed. And now it's on your mind, or now it's not on your mind anymore. And all of a sudden you're laying in bed and you're like, man, maybe it's days later even. And you're laying in bed and you're just like, your stomach's turning because there's something. And you're like, oh my gosh, there's something. I call it the 2 a.m. moment, right?
Yeah.
If you laying in bed at 2 a.m., there's something in there. Okay. And I've done this hundreds of times. Okay. And then I'm going through my phone. I'm like, I don't know what it is. It's email. Maybe it's on my calendar. I don't know where it is. Okay. And then it may hit me. Oh my gosh, it's this deal that I need to do something with. And then now I'm specifically going through and looking through my email, trying to find the right document. Well, what happens in real estate a lot of times is your first document isn't the one that gets signed. Okay.
Right.
Second, third, fourth, you may have 10 dang documents before you finally get one that's signed and executed. So as you're hunting through there, trying to find contract dates or people involved, you're looking through a mess and you're doing it at 2 a.m.
Right.
And what I know and what I knew and the gap that I, always felt like should be able to fill was I felt like the process, the systems, for brokerage, for real estate, really for anything, for ADP, for waste management, they should be built for the producers. Okay. I dealt with this at 8. I was thinking, why am I manually adding tasks and events? I'm calling these people on the phone and talking to them. Why isn't it putting it in there for me? This is such a waste of time. I've been dealing with this my entire career. This type of work takes away from the producer's ability to talk to people. And this is where I said, you know what? We can do this. I could forward an email. In fact, a lot of times I do. I forward it to my TC. But the problem is, and this isn't all TCs, but for me, the problem is it's like, okay, but like I'm forwarding it to the TC. She might do the work, or he, but I don't know if they did. I got no confirmation. And even if they did send a quick email back, like the only way that I can check or see is to actually go in to the system and see if it's there. But I don't log into that system for a reason. It's not user friendly. It's not built for me. It's built for my broker. And so even there's this gap. You can forward that email. The other piece is timelines. Why don't we have timelines on our Google Calendar? Why aren't we pulling these dates out? Well, I'll tell you why. Because we have drift. We're humans. As agents, we write up a contract, and then we have clients who have different time needs. And so we have to create addendums. Well, if you're doing more than one deal at a time, and you have an addendum and you've got to now go and change 4 different events on a calendar, that calendar is going to eventually be wrong.
It's funny. That was my son. I'll call him back, but I'm actually flying him up to the Cape. He's going to shoot a documentary about me and this guy who's starting this business. But anyway, I love this because, James, we think exactly alike. And what I'm seeing from you is I hate businesses that put an obstacle in the way of me spending my money. Right? And it could be as simple as walking into a restaurant that says, wait till the hostess seats you. There's nobody standing there. Immediately, you kind of go, you'll give them a 15-second grace, right? But if a waiter walks by, makes eye contact, doesn't say anything, already, I've been there 30 seconds, I'm a little annoyed. Like, guys, kind of get your act together here, right? How many times have you tried to call a business, press 1, press 2, do this, give me your account 4 times, do this, do that. You go, I just want to spend money. I want to buy something. Like, why are you putting all of these obstacles in the way? What I hear you saying is,
because it wasn't built for you, Gus.
Exactly. So what I hear you saying is you had a recognition, a $15,000 moment. But even beyond that, if that hadn't happened, just as a lifestyle, to be waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning because, oh shit, I forgot this thing. And then trying to look through your emails on your phone and not waking up the wife because she's saying, what the hell are you doing on your phone? And then going down into the kitchen and searching back and going, wait a minute, when did they change the closing date? And what happened with the inspection? And, oh, wait a minute, my transaction coordinator is gone for 3 days. She's not really getting back to me. Do I got to go into another system? It's no way to live.
No,
I mean,
it isn't.
forget about the money. It's just in terms of you have kids, in terms of being present, in terms of like having a life where you're on time for dinner and the Little League game, not sitting in your car searching for the latest update to some contract that you didn't even remember if that's the actual one that you're working on right now.
In an absolute panic, right? With a
Right.
5-year-old twisting your sunglasses, wanting your attention.
Right. So you go to work building this, and this is what I'm curious, as one founder to another. We don't know what we don't know until we start building it. And oftentimes you solve one problem and it creates another problem. I'm talking about the agentic workflow now, right? So as you're working through this, building this, the Keyflow, what were some unexpected obstacles that you came up against, and how did you solve them?
Well, I think the number one obstacle was what problem am I solving? And is it a relevant problem? And I already told you that I figured that one out through failure, which explains pretty much everything that I do in life. In fact, for me, I have always felt like I was the absolute worst person to do the closing process with, the transaction piece, which actually makes me to be the best person or one of the best people to solve it. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I've closed a lot of real estate transactions. And I bet you that I have made every single mistake probably 2 or 3 times. And I've got them all in my email, in my, process. I've captured all of those. But what I really needed from that standpoint was I needed a partner who could do this with me. Okay. And that's what I learned from the Y Combinator. After Nosio, I really started diving deep into what is a real problem and how do I find the right person? Okay. And I found that right person, my partner, Cole. He's the Chief Technology and Information Officer. He's also a co-founder of our business. And I could not have done this. I could not have built Keyflow without him. He brought the technical experience to complement my domain experience.
So you knew what the process was. You knew what the pain points was. And I'm thinking in my mind, it's like you don't get a guy with strong hands to design a tool to open hard to open jars. You get someone who doesn't have a lot of strength and goes, I can't open any jars. How do we design something that'll work for me? So you had experienced at an experiential level the pain because I suck at transaction closing. It's creating all kinds of anxiety. I'm making mistakes. I don't understand it. I know how to do it, but I can't get my brain to do it the same way every time because I'm interested in closing more deals. So it's driving me nuts. Now you bring a partner on, and now you can have these conversations with him, and he's a guy that says, well, in order to solve this, we'd have to plug this in. And you can't do it that way because there's proprietary information. So we got to close the system up. And so he's basically, you're telling him what you want. He's telling you what you can get, what you can't get, what you may be able to get in the future, what you can build right now. Is that accurate?
Yeah, kind of like that. What's really interesting about him is that he was also looking to solve a problem in the real estate industry. And he was looking at a similar issue, but from a side that I felt like in real estate, we spend a whole lot of time serving people who aren't even the buyer and seller. Everything that we have done, every system we have created in real estate has been to serve the support, and not even very good, but to serve the support and not to actually serve the buyer and the seller. right? And the more that Cole and I talked about that, we thought, man, like, how awesome would it be to create something from the perspective of a buyer and seller, right? Because they're the ones paying for all of this. In order to do that, because agents, you know, we are aligned with the needs of our clients. So by doing that, we are actually serving everyone who touches the process through the transaction phase.
Got it. So it's the one piece that everybody touches. The buyer touches it, the seller touches it, the attorneys touch it, the bank touches it, the inspectors touch it, the buyer's agent, the seller's agent. Everybody is involved in that process. And everybody, if that was just a nightmare from the agent's perspective, who the hell knows what a nightmare it was from the inspector's thing or from the
Well,
buyer's
it is a
attorney or this.
nightmare from everybody's perspective.
Right.
And I'll tell you that, like, anybody who's saying that they love that part of the process, is probably being a certain amount dishonest. Okay? Because it's very chaotic. And it is. And it doesn't have to be. It's chaotic because every person, every professional who touches that transaction during this phase has their own system. And they all use similar data points, but the information from the contracts are not pulled out. There is no layer. Before Keyflow, there was no layer that pulled this information out and allowed it to
Sync up.
sync into these disparate systems.
Okay, so let me hit you. I'm a broker, right? I'm listening to you. All this sounds great. Let me give you some of my fear and my pain points, and then you answer them for me. How's
Sure.
that sound?
Perfect.
Oh, I'm afraid, proprietary information, bank accounts, and all that stuff. Where does that go? How do we protect that information? And how do I know that the other side isn't going to see information I don't want them to see? I talked to my attorney. We changed something on it. It hasn't been negotiated yet. Like, where does all of it live so that the only people who are seeing what they need to see are seeing it and not seeing what they don't need to see?
Yeah. Well, what I would say to that is that information right now is being sent back and forth to different email addresses and being put into who knows what platforms. Okay. We are structuring the actual data and building security around our own platform. Okay. So from that standpoint, it's already chaotic. Okay.
Got it. Right now, listen, if someone hacked, and if this happened to me, I mean, this was a crazy story, James. You'll appreciate this. I'm doing corporate relo in New York City, right? Which means foreign people are moving into New York. At that time, they didn't have a social, they didn't have a credit score, so they were going to have to leave 3 to 6 months security, which is illegal now, but back then it wasn't. And I'm working with this guy from Japan, and I get an email, and he says, "Hey, I deposited the check in the bank." And I said, "What check?" He says, "Well, you sent me an email. You gave me a bank account number. You told me to go deposit the check." I said, "No, I didn't." He goes, "Yeah, here it is right here." And he sends it to me. Now, listen to this scam, James. Somebody was hacked into my email, was watching the transaction for 3 months, waited until the point when we had a verbal agreement with the landlord. And the whole time, what they had done was they had sent it through a filter in my inbox so that it ended up in a folder that I couldn't see. And then it responded from that folder to that client saying, "Go deposit the check."
So what you're describing here is actually very interesting, and it's a strength for Keyflow. And,
Exactly.
and I'll tell you exactly why. Okay, and we'll use wire fraud as an example.
Right.
Okay, one of the first things that a title company does, whenever you open a transaction, is they send out the wiring instructions. Okay. Now, if, for example, Keyflow is CC'd to that email. We receive those wiring instructions and we see them. Okay. Now, if there are wiring instructions that are changed further down the process, that would create a red flag for us. Now, I'm describing a feature that is not live right now, but it will be. Okay. This is why workflow is so critically important, because what you're describing is drift, but from from an accountability standpoint. You're describing drift from a bank account standpoint. If you are to change an account number at any point after you have already provided that information, that is a red flag. Okay. And everyone should be notified immediately.
So what you're saying is, I mean, in terms of security, right now, you've got 8 parties to this. You've got email. You've got who got hacked. We don't know what the hell's going on. It's all over the place. I mean, it's all over the internet. What you're saying is, hey, we're all going to put all this information in one place, which is Keyflow. Now we're all kind of on the same page. So if one of these parties all of a sudden does something crazy, the other people are going to go, whoa, wait a minute. We didn't, whoa, wait a second here, guys. The 7 of us never agreed on this. Like, how could this be? Or somebody decides to change the closing date, or they said they did, but nobody else knows. So basically it's a transaction coordinator that doesn't sleep, that doesn't make any mistakes, that knows the context of everything that's been said in every email from the beginning, and is basically coordinating that whole process.
It's a layer, right? It's a layer that everyone can integrate with and utilize throughout the process. Now, there will be always places where humans need to have the human-to-human conversation or go and drop the thing off that needs to be dropped off, right? But what this layer does is it creates a communication layer to make sure people are on the same page. Now, one of the points you brought up that I think is very important to consider is that change of closing day. Okay. One thing that we've been very careful with our product is you are not changing the closing day or the inspection period or any other critical date without a fully executed document. Because it doesn't matter, Gus, if you and your client, if you're an agent and your client signed a document and your agent talked to the other agent on the phone and they verbally agreed and you never sent that document out for that signature, it does not matter.
Well, let me tell you something, James, and I had 100 agents working for me, and every time a deal went south, my instructions to them were this: if you pull the string back to where the problem started, it was always miscommunication. 100% of the time, what I said and what they heard weren't in the same universe. So if I said to them, hey, listen, you need to get your tax returns together for the last 3 years, right, to put together a board package, what they might have heard is, hey, Gus isn't doing his job. Like, why do I have to do this? Right? And that little miscommunication then gets traced all the way to when I'm trying to put together the board package and they're resisting giving me their tax returns because they don't, whatever it is, that's where it gets messy. And I hear what you're saying is this solves that. Because if it ain't in writing, it doesn't exist.
That's right. And from a broker's perspective, when are you hearing about problems? Well, when do you hear about problems?
When it's bad.
When it's bad. That's right.
When the deal's falling apart, when someone wants their money back, when someone's trying to walk away, when something really bad happened, when a fair housing thing popped up where all of a sudden they said, I said something, or it's not good.
That's right.
I'm getting a call from a pissed off buyer that said, hey, wait a minute, James didn't tell me I owe you 15 grand at the closing.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And that actually is the situation that every broker is in. They're not going to hear about things until they're a problem. And so there's that bit of risk in that. And so the way that they handle that, the way that brokers try and reduce that anxiety is by creating their own system and processes and enforcing them. Some brokerages, they require the use of transaction coordinators that are really just kind of sitting in the broker's position and looking at documents so that they can make sure that the documents are there. And if they're not, they're staying on top of the agent to make sure that they go into the system that the agents are not getting documents into because it does not fit into their workflow, right? And this is a system not created for the producer. Okay, so the producer struggles to get the information into the system. Okay. And the more transactions or the more perceived risk that that broker feels, they can take two directions. They can either just give up on trying to manage it, or they can create more detailed workflow to handle it, which pushes away your producers and it creates a barrier between the new agents who could be large producers in the future. And what they are really trying to do at the end of the day is be able to say, hey, or be able to look very quickly and see, hey, this deal right here is supposed to have a contract in the system today. And if it isn't, then we know for sure that it didn't get done.
Got it. So let me switch gears for a minute, James, because we started this out in a whole different realm. As a person, right? How are you keeping up, quote unquote, on AI? What podcasts are you listening to? How are you doing your training? How do you sort of not go down the AI rabbit hole of being able to wake up in the middle of the night and start a Claude co-work or a project? I found sometimes my best business plans were buried underneath a thread saying, where's the closest place to get a good chicken sandwich? And then the next day, I'm like, man, that was a brilliant idea last night. Where the hell did I talk about that? How do I find it? So how do you personally sort of stay in charge or in top of all of this?
Well, I mean, our users are driving our product. Okay. So we've got agents utilizing our product today and we are there to serve them. So
Got it.
whatever workflows that they need, then we are looking to adapt our product to ensure that we are actually addressing that gap that I discussed.
So your focus right now is on their workflow. So your focus is like, hey, they hit a pain point, or this little thing, we got to tweak it this way or that way. So to answer the question of how your focus in the use and education of AI right now is in solving the workflow issues that come up in Keyflow.
Yeah, I think that from an AI perspective, AI can do a lot of different things. But for us, our focus is not on some sort of user interface, which we do have a user interface, but our focus is solving a problem on the back end that a lot of businesses where a lot of professionals in the real estate industry are not only feeling, but already paying money to try and solve that specific problem. Okay. So we are taking unstructured data and making it available to any system in real time so that we can coordinate between multiple parties, multiple changing dynamics, okay, to serve the buyers and sellers in the real estate industry.
Got it. Now, let me ask you this. What other problems are they having right now? If you had the time and the energy to solve two or three other problems for real estate folks right now, being so deep in the space, where do you think the next big solution is?
I think that, the next big solution is still the solution that we're all trying to solve, which is everyone has disparate systems that don't communicate with each other. And if you're in any type of an industry where multiple roles are involved and any coordination is involved, and you all have different systems that you operate out of, and there's any amount of financial risk at all, that is the big problem to solve. People People are creative. We are innately built to have drift. We are not computers. Computers are built to do the same thing in repetition, and they're really good at that. And so for us right now, not just Keyflow, but anybody who is looking at any industry from a technical perspective and trying to understand where does AI or technology fit in, you just have to understand those two pieces. The human aspect, the creative, the personal, that's what they're good at. How do we put those people in that role? How do we let them spend more time here and less time over here doing the rework or documenting what they've already done over here in real time on the back end so that the paperwork, so that it can all meet from
Love
the
that.
backside.
And you know what? And that's a great place to aim, and James, because that's kind of where I started, which was the only purpose of AI is to do more of what you love and less of what you don't. And there's a process, and it's messy, and it changes, and new tools come along and can do something better. But what I'm finding is there's got to be a mind shift from the old days, like, oh, I got QuickBooks now, that handles that, I'm done with that. There has to be a transformative mindset that starts with the owner of every business that says what is now possible is going to change every 3 months and change radically in ways that I don't even understand. And unless I have a system in place where I'm continuously looking at my workflows and what I can do to bring my team to doing what they love and what they're best at, and we're all in alignment with that, those are the people that are going to win in the future. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the people who right now who are taking unstructured data and organizing it and capturing it in a structured way, I think that the longer and the more developed the AI gets, the better off those people are going, the better off, farther ahead those people are going to be, because they're going to be able to take their AI and they're going to be able to say, hey, AI, take a look at this data and help me do better.
Love it. James, stay on for a minute because I want to talk. I appreciate all this time, man. I feel like I could talk to you for the next 4 hours about this stuff. I'm having a great time with this. So thank you for this. If people want to get in touch with you, James, or they want a demo or they want to put this stuff into place, go ahead and tell them how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find us at Keyflow.ai. That's Keyflo.ai. You can reach out to me at james@keyflow.ai. And I'd love to hear from you. Go to our website, schedule some time. You can access our calendar directly there. Whether you're a broker, a transaction coordinator, a title company, an agent, a buyer, a seller, get in touch with me, because what we're building is the integration layer to serve all of those roles.
Fantastic, James. Thank you so much. Hold on. And for everybody who watched Real Estate Rewired AI with a Heart, thank you so much. If you'd like to reach out and be on the show, give us a reach out. And I'll say it one more time. The only purpose of AI is to allow you to do more of what you love and less of what you don't. So thanks for watching. If you've got value from today's episode, hit subscribe, leave a comment. I'd love to know what you're thinking. If you're ready to turn what you love into your superpower and take what you hate off your plate, schedule your free AI discovery call. The link is in the description and pinned comment. I'm Gus Waite. Until next time.